That would be me. So the title of this talk is, Why Don't We Pursue Our Dreams? But as I was thinking about it, I really should have phrased it as a question. Why don't we pursue our dreams? And when I think about the dreams that I'm referring to, it's the dream of creating a new venture, a small business, a community organization, a nonprofit, a way to make an impact on the world around you. And when I think about pursuing those dreams, it's about taking the idea from inception to reality, from an idea to something that makes an impact. And when I thought about both my journey and many of the entrepreneurs I've talked to over the last 25 years, what I found was the barriers to taking that idea and doing something with it turn out not to be other people. They're not externally focused. It's not the heart. It's not the passion that someone has for the idea. In fact, it's right here. It's the brain. We are wired to fear failure. We're wired to feel failure because when we were on the savannas in Africa millennia ago, and we heard a rustling in the bushes next to us, we had a choice to make very quickly. Did we run or did we stay? And if we stayed and the rustling was a lion, we were going to be lunch. If we ran, we had the opportunity to escape and live another day. And in fact, if we ran and the only thing that was in the bushes was the wind, well, we had a good laugh, we burned some calories, and our genes were moved to everyone here in the TEDx conference today. All of us are descendants from those individuals on the savannah who ran. Well, that was great when we were living in the savannah. And we wanted that limbic system right here, the back of our brain, right into our spinal column to flee. In today's modern world, however, we're now wired to react to fear that may not be as life-threatening as the lion in the bushes. So, what is it that we should be thinking about as the alternative? If we have these dreams and we want to pursue them, and we don't, what happens? Well, unfortunately, what happens is this terrible waste of human potential. There is a survey that Gallup has done worldwide that asked employees, are you engaged at work? And it turns out only 13% of people said yes. All right, so that's 87% of employees going to work every day and feeling not motivated. In fact, not even not motivated. It turns out 24% of the people who responded to this survey said they were actively disengaged. I was like, actively disengaged? What does that mean? I read the survey. The question was, do you sabotage your boss or your company? So that is not just a human waste of potential, that's a catastrophe. So the question would be, if you are waking up every day and going to a job where you are not passionate, where you are not creating something that is using your skills, your mastery, if you don't have the ability to make decisions and be autonomous, you're not motivated, well, why aren't you coming up with dreams and pursuing those dreams? Well, it turns out it's not the ideas that are the problem. It's taking those ideas and doing something with them. And so when I think about my particular journey, and for me, overcoming that fear of taking the first step, I think back to 1994, and I was in graduate school, and I'd written a business plan with two classmates to create an online insurance marketplace. So think back to the mid-1990s when the internet wasn't like it is today. For those of you who've been to the States, you've had America Online, and CompuServe is the only two ways to get to the internet. So this was very early on. We had an advisor who met with us just before winter break, December 1994, and we're going through the business plan, and Professor Parker turns to the three of us and says, this is a very well-written business plan, but are you actually going to start this company? The other two of my classmates quickly said no, they were going back to their day jobs, and Professor Parker turned to me and said, Stephen, what are you going to do? And I said, I don't know. And he said, well, what do you want to do in 10 years? That I knew. I'd thought about that quite a bit. And I said, I want to help a technology company grow. And he then asked me a very simple question. Why don't you want to help this technology company grow? And I was straightforward and honest, and I said, what if I fail? What if I haven't had the experience managing people? I haven't raised money. I haven't been a CEO. What if I try this and it doesn't work? And he said very sage words. If you try this and the business does not work, you are so much closer to your dream than if you've done anything else. And that's all he said. And I knew what I had to do. We left the meeting. I called my then fiance, Allison. I said, can we live off of your salary while we get this business up and running? She said yes. We were married soon after. We've been married for over 20 years, so that worked. Oh, and the business, right, sorry, the business, that also worked. So we created the world's first online insurance marketplace. We were helping hundreds of thousands of consumers shop for insurance every month, and that company was bought by Intuit and became Quicken Insurance. That was a great experience, but as I thought about what I needed, this catalyst from Professor Parker, and the question that he asked, the simple question of why not, I started to think about what are the other barriers, what were the fears that I had, and could I unpack them? Because if we could lower the barriers, if we could lower that friction to deciding to pursue your ideas, maybe more people would do it, and the catalyst would take less energy to get moving. So I started asking the question, what is the true cost of failure? And certainly since that internet business back in 1995 was started to today, the statistics are remarkable. The cost of failure has shrunk every single year for the past 20 years. The line on the top is the number of new business starts. The line that's declining are the number of bankruptcies. And the bankruptcy is what most people fear, I think, the most when they're thinking about starting a new business. The ultimate catastrophe from a personal financial perspective. If the business doesn't make it, I am ruined forever. Well, it turns out those statistics, when you look at them, are less scary than you might think. The reality versus the perception are not the same. Then I started to think about what are the other potential barriers in the way. And I started to put together, I was trained as a physicist, so this reminded me of my days in the classroom, and I started to think about what are all the things that help ideas get all the way through to fulfillment that I wanted more of, and then what were the things I wanted less of. And I wanted more knowledge. I wanted to know more, and I wanted to avoid mistakes that other people had made. So that was the end, that was the knowledge. I wanted to spend less on equipment, and I wanted to spend less time raising money, less capital required. And I wanted to have less struggle, and I certainly didn't want to have every waking moment be consumed by the business. So I had 1 over T, and that was fulfillment. No, that's all bullshit. I would have loved to have come up with a formula that actually worked and was the recipe for success in starting a new business. But as you can tell here, there's no law called Stephen's Law. And if there was one, it certainly would not be named after me. But despite that, and as I was working on the whiteboard, I realized many of these particular elements are in fact true and related to a business's success, taking that idea from inception to reality. So let's look at some of these particular elements. In particular, let's look at what technology has transpired in the last 20 years. How does that help us think we can move an idea from idea to reality? When I started that business, it cost me $100,000 just to get a single web page published. We had to buy servers from Sun Microsystems, a database from Oracle, software from Netscape Communications. By the way, many of these companies don't exist anymore. Then I had to go run a T1 line into our office, which is a big communications pipe that costs $3,000 a month. Then I had to go wire cables in the office. Then I had to lug a half-ton air conditioner up the stairs and put it in the office where all of these computers were. And every night when I went home, I'd dump out the water from the condenser so that the air conditioner would keep working. I can now, in the span of minutes, with a credit card, get dramatically more power and have a website up and running for less than $10 a month. That is not available just for technology companies, but I have that power on my phone as a small business owner. I can do that work from anywhere. I can collaborate. I can get information. I can get knowledge, which I will talk about in a moment. And that certainly is now reducing the barrier to bringing the idea from inception to reality. The other thing that's changed radically is the amount of information that we have available to us. I'm a glass collector, and I spent some time on the island of Murano in Venice. And when I went to Murano, what I found was people had been blowing glass for centuries. And they told me a story that back in the medieval ages, you joined the guild. And when you joined the guild to learn to blow glass, you were apprenticing for 15, 20 years before you became a master. On that journey, you also had a compact that you would not leave the island of Murano, and the rumor had it that if you attempted to leave, they would send an assassin down to keep the information from escaping into the world. They trapped knowledge. The guild gave you, but the guild took it away. When I think about that story and now think about the availability of information to anyone with an internet connection, to anyone who has a particular question or idea, and even going back 20 years, if I wanted to find an expert in my field, I had to pick up a phone book. I had to find someone and call them and have them talk to me. Now you have blogs and you have social media, and you have people willing to share their ideas freely. That information can be used, again, to lower the likelihood that you make the same mistake as someone else has made. Let's all go make new mistakes, but let's attempt to avoid old mistakes along the way. To be able to make new mistakes, though, you have to believe one very fundamental principle, a principle that Carol Dweck, the woman here on the screen, posited, and that is, as human beings, we have an infinite capacity to learn and improve. In fact, she created a concept called the growth mindset. And the growth mindset is illustrated best by the example that when we're children and we're learning to walk, the first time we stand up, we're going to fall over. And the second time, and the third time, and the 500th time, and the 1,000th time. What if the first time you stood up to walk and you fell over, your parents said, "You're a crawler. You're never going to walk. Forget it." Well, none of us would be walkers. And in fact, that exact same learning process happens when we learn to talk and to read and to speak. Everything that we do as a child is a process of ongoing repetition and learning. As adults, we forget that. We think we're supposed to be experts, and in fact, we're afraid that we might fail. We need to find some way to get back to this concept of growth mindset and get out of our own way when we're thinking about learning something new, and starting a new venture is all about trying something new. So in closing, I think about some very important concepts that can help us take ideas from inception to reality. I think about not only are we wired for fear of failure, but we are wired to learn. The risks of starting a new business today are actually lower than they've ever been. The information available to us is higher than they've ever been. The technology is available. The cost is lower. The conditions are ripe now for everyone to take their idea and step forward. And my father, who's a professor of sociology who studied entrepreneurship his whole life, said something to me that I think is quite important that I wanted to share with you. And what he said was, in order to succeed, you have to start before you're ready. Thank you very much.